When I was a child, my parents died in a car accident. I have no other relatives. My father's comrade-in-arms adopted me. This uncle has a very good relationship with our family. I used to visit their house often during the new year. I especially like their daughter. She is a few months older than me, and I call her sister. My sister is really beautiful and treats me very well. I have always liked her, but since I came, everything has changed. At first, my sister thought I was here to play and was very nice to me. But when the uncle bought me new clothes and toys and arranged a room for me, my sister was very jealous. She asked the uncle why he bought things for me and why he took away the room in the house. The uncle said that because my brother's father died, he would take care of me in the future. After hearing this, my sister said to me loudly, "Your father's dead, so you should die with him. You don't have a father yourself. Why do you come to steal my father?" I cried directly and ran to the room and cried loudly. The uncle scolded my sister and came to comfort me. He said that we were young and ignorant, and we would understand each other in the future. But as I grew older, my sister's attitude towards me did not change. I transferred to her class, and she always told my classmates that I was a wild orphan, and asked them to isolate me together. Every time my uncle was not at home, she said that I was a dog raised by her family, who could only wag her tail to ask for food from her father, and was worse than a beggar. She always bullied me and asked me to help her with things. When I was in boarding high school, she refused to wash clothes and threw them all to me to wash. I didn't want to, and felt that it was undignified, but she would say, "Wild orphan, then don't use my father's money." I completely felt the humiliation of living under someone else's roof, so I had to help her wash for 3 years. But my uncle was really good to me, and he almost took care of me. Maybe I was a bitch, and my uncle was good to me, so I hoped that he could have a harmonious family, so I always tried to please my sister carefully, hoping that she would change her mind about me one day. Until the end of the college entrance examination, I was admitted to a third-tier university, and my sister was admitted to a second-tier university. She used this to mock me, but what could I do? She could calm down and study hard, but what about me? I have to help her wash clothes, run errands for her, always listen to her orders, and take care of her like a slave for 3 years. It happened that last year because of the epidemic, my uncle's business lost everything, and the family owed a lot of debts, and we couldn't afford to go to college. My sister didn't even think about it at the time, and told my uncle not to let the wild orphan go to college. Anyway, he couldn't study well, so he went out to work to support me. She used to call me like this when my uncle was not around. This time she was too proud and couldn't help calling me a wild orphan in front of my uncle. My uncle slapped my sister in the face. He even made a decision to let me continue to go to college and let my sister go out to work. My sister was furious at the time. She burst into tears and said that my uncle favored boys over girls. Now that he had a son, he only knew to protect the wild orphan. The more she called me like this, the angrier my uncle became. He grabbed her hair and slapped her several times, telling her to keep her mouth clean. I was terrified and tried to persuade my uncle, but my sister pushed me away fiercely. There was blood on the corner of her mouth. She called me a bitch and told me not to be hypocritical. After she finished scolding me, she ran out. Since then, my sister never came home again. I learned about her situation through my classmates. She had completely changed from a quiet girl to a hot girl who went to bars all day, hanging out with people of questionable character every day, and had a very rich boyfriend. She didn't even come back during the Chinese New Year. She only came to me once in such a long time. At that time, she rented a house outside. She said that the landlord was afraid that she was young and wanted more people to sign together. She refused to tell my uncle and asked me to go over to sign and seal. After I went over, she handed me the contract directly. Before I had time to read it, she asked me to sign and get out. That was our only meeting. I blamed myself. I felt that this family was turned upside down because of me, an outsider. My uncle also wanted to win my sister back, but his business was too tiring and he had to go on business trips all the time, so I was usually alone at home. That day, I was reading at home, and my sister suddenly came back. She was wearing a deep V-neck camisole with a leopard print miniskirt, which made her look like a prostitute. but she looked a little haggard, and her eyes were red. I said, "Sister, you're back, Uncle's not at home." She pushed me away and went back to her room, and soon she started crying. I was a little panicked, hiding at her door and eavesdropping, and heard her talking on the phone with a man, begging that man not to leave her. It turned out that she was breaking up with her rich boyfriend. After a while, my sister came out and took the white wine from home. I was afraid that she would give up on herself, so I went to comfort her. My sister's attitude towards me was not fierce anymore. She poured 2 glasses of wine and asked me to drink with her. I said I didn't know how to drink, and she said she was in a bad mood today, so she asked me to drink with her, and asked me to drink it all in one gulp. I had to endure the discomfort and drink a large glass, but I found that my sister didn't drink. She suddenly poured wine on my face, calling me a lowly and shameless person. She told me to drink and I really drank. I stole her bitch and licked her face to comfort her. Am I qualified to drink with her? I was very upset by my sister's scolding, but I didn't want to quarrel with her, so I left the room by myself. My sister drank a lot in the room alone, and finally cried. Finally, I was afraid that she drank something, so I went to the room to see her. She had drunk and fell on the bed, drunk. Her suspenders sagged down, and her skirt was also looming. I didn't dare to look too much, so I carefully sorted out the wine bottles and wanted to see her situation by the way. As a result, my sister suddenly grabbed my hand. She drunkenly asked me not to leave, but she called another man's name. I knew she was drunk, and she pulled me to her side, hugged me tightly, and said she couldn't live without me. Although she changed her style, my sister was still so beautiful. The smell of wine mixed with her body fragrance was particularly good. I tried to restrain myself, but she kissed me directly and put one leg on me. I had drunk a whole glass of white wine, and my head was dizzy, but I was still thinking about rejecting her. But while she was kissing me, she suddenly said, "I only have you. I don't want to go back to see my father and that bastard." At this moment, I couldn't bear it anymore. Maybe it was because of the alcohol, and deep hatred broke out in my heart. I have endured it for so many years, but she still treats me like this. I hugged her and kissed her directly, thinking viciously in my heart, "Didn't you call me a bastard? Now you throw yourself into the arms of a bastard. You are even more cheap than me." 10. It's all caused by alcohol. Alcohol makes cowards brave. When I woke up the next day, I saw my sister lying next to me, her eyes full of hatred, staring at me. I was so scared that I woke up directly, and quickly explained that I drank too much yesterday. But she suddenly took out the scissors in the bedside table and stabbed me fiercely. I got up quickly, and when I saw the bedsheet, I realized how much trouble I had caused. I thought she was a prostitute, but it was her first time. My sister seemed to be crazy. She burst into tears and poked me with scissors. I quickly ran back to my room, closed the door, and shouted sorry. She banged the door hard outside, and finally used a kitchen knife to chop the door, shouting that she would kill me, and then die herself, and die together. The door was cut with several holes, but my sister still couldn't get in. I kept hiding in the house, scared to the point of being breathless, hating my stupidity, and I almost wanted to slap myself. I finally waited for a long time without any movement outside, and then I secretly opened the door to see if my sister was still at home, and apologized to her when she calmed down. But when I went to her room, I was dumbfounded. My sister changed into a red dress and lay in the bathtub in her room. There was a wound on her wrist, and the floor of the bathroom was covered with blood. I was terrified and quickly picked up my sister. She was cold all over, so I called an ambulance and sent her to the hospital, but she couldn't be saved. I killed my sister. I made her choose suicide. It turned out that she hated me to this extent. After my uncle came back, I told him everything. My uncle, who always loved me, was so angry that he yelled and hit me with his fists, knocking me to the ground. He became as ferocious as a wild beast. But in the end he stopped, sat on the ground and cried, and I also lay on the ground and cried. My sister's death brought a great disaster to the community. She committed suicide in a red dress, and many funeral homes dared not accept her call. Everyone said that the housing prices in the community would plummet. The neighbors called my uncle and said that if they dared to bring my sister's body back, they would fight with our family, and they would definitely block the gate of the community and not let us in. especially my neighbors upstairs and downstairs. I heard that they didn't pack their things and went to live in hotels and relatives' homes. I wanted to attend my sister's funeral, but my uncle seemed to hate me so much that he asked me to stay at home first, saying that I shouldn't come out if I had nothing to do, and he didn't want to see me for the time being. When I got home, I thought of my sister, who committed suicide, and my heart was full of guilt. My uncle didn't come back until late at night. I sat in the hall and turned on the TV, but I didn't look at the screen at all. Instead, I looked at my sister's room from time to time. The room had been sealed by the police. I was in a daze, regretting my behavior. The time appeared on the TV, and it was already midnight. I turned off the TV and wanted to stay in my room. After turning off the TV, the house became very quiet, but at this time, I heard a strange sound. It seemed that there was a sound of water coming from my sister's room. I felt confused because there was obviously no one in the room. I suspected that I heard it wrong. It might be the sound upstairs or downstairs, but after thinking carefully, the neighbors upstairs and downstairs were scared away during the day, and they probably dared to come back after the first 7 nights of returning to the soul. Why was there a sound in my sister's room? I stood up, walked to my sister's room, and grabbed the door handle. The moment I turned the door handle, the light in the house seemed to be broken, flashed, and the whole house fell into darkness. I looked back and the light was on again. Maybe there was just a problem with the bulb, which is a common thing. I opened the door, and the sound of water inside became more obvious. There was no one in my sister's room, but the table lamp on her bedside was on. This table lamp was probably turned on all night. The light was too bright to be noticed during the day, and I only found it was still on now. On the bedside table was a photo of my sister when she was a child. She was wearing a pure white princess dress, nestled in my uncle's arms, and smiled sweetly. She really cared about my uncle. I went into the bathroom, but found that the toilet was leaking. I fixed the toilet, and then went to turn off the table lamp. Sister. I felt guilty and couldn't help but take a look at her photo. But just by looking at it, I almost scared my soul away. The sister in the childhood photo turned out to be what she looked like when she grew up, and she was still wearing that red dress, staring at me. I was so scared that I wanted to run away. When I turned around to run away, the door of the room suddenly creaked. There was no window or wind in the room, but the door was slowly closing by itself. At this moment, the sound of a key opening the door came from the front door. It was my uncle who came back. The door of the room, which was about to close automatically, seemed to have sensed that my uncle was coming back, and it suddenly stopped, without even a little inertia, as if someone was holding the door with his hand. I ran to the front door in fear, and my uncle saw me. I trembled and wanted to tell him what happened just now. But he suddenly hugged me and told me hoarsely that my sister had been cremated and would be buried at dawn. Her suicide method was too weird, and no one wanted to do business with my sister, and even the basic custom of keeping the body for 3 days was not met. Even a tombstone was not willing to be made, and it was specifically requested that the tombstone for my sister be made after the night of the return of the soul. I felt extremely uncomfortable. I wanted to tell my uncle about this matter, but I couldn't speak. How should I tell him? Is the room of his beloved daughter very weird? At his age, how can he bear the blows one after another? My uncle asked me to stay at home, and he had to call relatives to the funeral home to make final preparations for my sister. I asked my uncle if he hated me, and he shook his head. He said, "What's the use of hating? Why choose to leave the world by himself, and now he only has me? If he doesn't even have me, he will really become a lonely person in the future." 22 Uncle's words made me even more heartbroken. He simply tittied up and then went out. After he left, I didn't dare to stay at home alone. After making sure he left the community, I hurried out. But when I grabbed the door, I suddenly heard the sound of the lock. The door was suddenly locked. I was shocked and quickly took out the key and inserted it into the lock in the house, trying to open the lock. One circle, and another circle. Every time I turned a circle, I could hear the sound of the lock being opened. People who have used security doors know that security doors have at most 2 layers of locks. But I don't know what happened to the door. I unlocked it 7 or 8 times clockwise, but it still wouldn't open. Suddenly, the creaking sound rang again. I turned my head stupidly to look. but found that my sister's door was slowly opening. I was scared and tried harder to open the door, but I couldn't open it. The door of the room opened wider and wider, and I got goosebumps all over my body. Suddenly, something behind the door was slowly poking out. It was a red skirt. It fluttered in the wind behind the door. But the window of the room was clearly closed. I was so scared that my legs went weak and I cried and screamed. I said to my sister, "I'm sorry, I did something wrong. But everyone is responsible for this matter. It was obviously you who hugged me and kissed me first. Now my uncle only has me. If you kill me, who will take care of my uncle in the future? Do you have the heart to let my uncle die alone?" The red skirt is still fluttering. The desk lamp in my sister's room, which had just been turned off, suddenly lit up slowly. The photo of my sister under the lamp slowly faded from color to black and white. Only a touch of the color of the red dress was deeply engraved in the photo. The sound of water splashing came from the bathroom again. I swallowed my saliva. What should I do? The door was locked and I couldn't get out. Jumping out of the window was impossible. We lived on the 8th floor, now I couldn't escape. Staying there was like waiting to die. The lights at home were too dark. I turned on the lights in the entrance hall. Next to it was the public bathroom in the living room. It was pitch black. Now I was too afraid of the dark. I hurried into the bathroom and turned on the lights in the bathroom. The moment the bathroom lights were turned on, I could see clearly inside. On the large wash basin mirror, the back of a woman in a red dress appeared. That was my sister's back. She had her back to me, and blood was still flowing on one wrist. She turned slowly towards me in the mirror. My heart was in my throat. The moment I saw her face, my sister stretched out her hand towards me. The hand actually stretched out from the mirror. Before I could react, she grabbed my neck. In an instant, her face became extremely terrifying. Her face was purple and blue, covered with bloodshot, and her eyes turned blood red. I struggled hard, with stars in my eyes, and tried hard to break free. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't pull her away. From the corner of my eye, I saw a pair of scissors floating out of my sister's room. Those were the scissors she wanted to use to poke me before she died. I was so anxious. The scissors were getting closer and closer to me. I felt so close to death. Suddenly, I fell to the ground. Everything in the house returned to normal. My sister's figure suddenly disappeared, the sound of water in the room stopped, and the lamp dimmed. I rushed out of the house frantically, and the door that was originally unopenable was opened by me. I gasped and looked back in fear. There was a clock hanging in the hall, and it showed that it was already 1 o'clock in the middle of the night. For some reason, an explanation came to my mind. It was past midnight. I had heard that midnight was the time of the day when the yin energy was the heaviest, so ghosts would appear at midnight. Could it be true? I didn't dare to stay at home, but went to the internet cafe downstairs. There were many people staying up all night here. Seeing so many people, I finally felt at ease. All night, I didn't dare to go to the toilet, but lay in the crowded area of the internet cafe to rest. Once there was a movement next to me, I would wake up suddenly, and seeing so many people, I felt at ease. The next morning, I finally dared to go home because my mobile phone was still in the house. I opened the door and didn't dare to close it. I hurried to get my mobile phone, and then called my uncle to tell him about it. After hearing this, my uncle was very surprised. He said that my sister had been buried and would come back to find me immediately. He also asked me sternly if what I said was true. I said of course it was true. My uncle couldn't help sobbing. It is already a painful thing for the elderly to send off their children, and as a parent, who can accept such a thing? I waited for my uncle to come back downstairs until noon, and he finally came back, and he brought someone with him. After entering the house, he asked me to call that man Liubo, saying that Liubo was very capable. No one dared to take over my sister's funeral, only Liubo took over, and today my sister's burial was in charge of him. Liubo told us that he felt very strange when he was burying her today, because the burial was extremely smooth. Usually, people who died suddenly like this will inevitably have some problems. Although ordinary people find it difficult to detect, professionals like him can find it. Especially for my sister, who committed suicide in a red skirt. 1 is wearing a red skirt, 2 is dying in the water, and 3 is suicide. It can be said that my sister has violated all the taboos. Now he understands that my sister's ghost has been at home and has not left at all. I asked Liu Bo with some fear whether my sister wanted to take my life. He said it was very likely that if he didn't care, someone would probably die on the night of the return of the soul. I was a little scared and said that there were still 6 days left. What should we do? But he shook his head. Uncle Liu said that the return of the soul of an ordinary person takes 7 days, but the evil spirit only takes 1 day. Because the evil spirit is violent and will be devoured by cruelty, it usually cannot wait for 7 days. Now my sister is the evil spirit, and tonight will be the return of the soul. I was even more scared when I heard it. I also know that I am ashamed of my sister, but I don't want to pay the price with my life. Uncle Liu asked us to talk about the grievances with my sister, and I tried to make it clear. After listening, he said, "Why would your sister commit suicide because of this? I can't figure it out. This is drunken promiscuity, not rape. Although she will have deep regrets, she won't commit suicide, right?" I said, "Maybe it's because my sister hates me very much." Uncle Liu sighed and said, "You too, seeing your sister dressed up beautifully, you really think of her as a prostitute. She may not be a bad child by nature, so she can't bear the blow." I felt very uncomfortable. I never thought that this would be my sister's first time. I knew that she played with people of questionable character every day, and even lived with her boyfriend. And when she came back, she looked so slutty in that little vest and miniskirt. Now I only regret it. I shouldn't have judged people by appearance, and brought great harm to my sister. She just rebelled and loved to dress up. She was not such an open person. Uncle Liu sighed and said, "Now is not the time to care about why she committed suicide. The most important thing is to help you get through the difficulties first." I hurriedly asked, "What should I do?" He said, "When evil spirits harm people, their minds are not clear, because they are blinded by hatred. Ghosts find you through your breath. If there is a double pillow in the room, take it apart now, and then stuff all your clothes into the pillowcase." I hurriedly said that there was a double pillow in my room, and my uncle was afraid that I would turn my head and get a stiff neck when I slept, so he always gave me a double pillow. We took off the pillowcase, stuffed all the clothes into the pillowcase, and then put it on the bed. "Cover the quilt, it looks like someone is lying inside." Uncle Liu told me that since the pillowcase is mine, it is even better, and the smell is stronger. I asked him if there was anything else to do, and he told us that after killing the enemy, the ghost has to drink his blood to relieve the hatred in his heart. He asked me to get some blood. It happened that my uncle was familiar with the doctor in the clinic downstairs. The clinic had cooperation with the big hospital and often drew blood for the people in the community, and then sent the test tubes to the big hospital for examination. So we went to the clinic to draw a few tubes of blood and took the test tubes back. Uncle Liu looked at the time and said, "The ghost will come to seek revenge at midnight on the night of the return of the soul. You should have a good rest first. When it is almost 11 o'clock, you need to do 2 things. First, put a bowl at the head of the bed and pour your blood into it. When the ghost has killed someone, it will drink the blood. Second, remember to hide under the bed, because you have a stronger aura. If you hide under the bed, and there are your clothes in the pillowcase, the ghost will not be able to tell whether it is real or fake, and will think it is you lying on the bed." I nodded repeatedly, and Uncle Liu said seriously, "Just take care of these. We'll not stay with you because the ghosts are not sane when they kill their enemies, and we might be affected if we stay. You should hide under the bed and don't make any noise, so as not to be discovered." Uncle sighed deeply. My 2 children have fallen into the state of being enemies. Uncle Liu patted his shoulder and comforted him, saying, "This is good for your daughter. The evil ghost killed people and drank blood. Although it has achieved these 2 conditions, it will never be reincarnated. She didn't kill anyone but only drank blood. After the night of returning souls, she can be reincarnated." Uncle nodded uncomfortably, and Uncle Liu let me go to rest first. I was really exhausted. I was so shocked last night, and I didn't sleep well all night. I was busy with so many things during the day. I fell on the bed, set the alarm, and fell into a deep sleep. When I was awakened by the alarm, it was already 10 o'clock in the evening. Uncle and Uncle Liu had left. They would wait for my news in the hotel outside. I still had an hour to prepare, so I had plenty of time. I took the bowl and put it on the bedside table. I just wanted to go to the bathroom, so I went to the bathroom. While I was peeing, a creaking sound came, which scared me. I turned my head suddenly, but saw that the door of my sister's room was slowly opening again. My God, isn't it still midnight? There is still an hour left. How could it be different from what Uncle Liu said? I saw the red skirt appear from behind the door, and I ran to my room in fear. I quickly grabbed a few test tubes and opened them, and tremblingly poured the blood into the bowl. My eyes were always on the door, and the door handle was slowly twisted down at this time. The door opened, and a blurry figure in a red skirt appeared at the door. I was so scared that I quickly lay on the ground and got under the bed. I don't know if she saw me. Hiding under the bed, I could see a pair of feet outside. Those were my sister's feet. She was barefoot and had no shoes on. Her feet were strangely tiptoed, as if she was bearing the weight of her whole body with only 2 big toes, and she was walking slowly towards this side. I could still barely see that my sister was holding a knife in her hand. She was getting closer and closer to the bed, and I gradually couldn't see the knife anymore. My sister's feet were right next to me, so close to me that I was so scared that my heartbeat accelerated. I covered my mouth and didn't dare to make any sound, not even a rough breath. Suddenly, I heard the sound of something being pierced. Then, my sister turned around and walked out the door. The door closed automatically, and I stupidly hid under the bed, not daring to come out. I took out my phone and turned it to silent, and quickly sent a message to my uncle to tell him what was going on here. Uncle replied very quickly. It should have been sent by Uncle Liu. Impossible. It's not midnight yet. But she came, what about now? She left, but I don't know if she's gone far. Why did she leave? The evil spirits will take revenge on the night of the return of the soul, and they won't stop until they achieve their goal. It seems that the situation has changed. We'll be back soon. I hid under the bed and waited until Uncle and Uncle Liu came back before I finally dared to come out. Uncle Liu looked at the situation in the room. The middle and lower part of the pillow was indeed stabbed with a knife, and it was stabbed. Uncle Liu said, "Show what you just saw." I stood by the bed, imitated my sister and stabbed the pillow, then turned and left. No, Uncle Liu frowned suddenly. We asked him what was wrong. He said, "She stood here, and your blood was placed on the bedside table on the other side. She didn't climb onto the bed, nor did she go around to the other side. How could she get the bowl of blood? And I saw that the blood didn't seem to be drunk at all." I asked puzzledly what that meant. Uncle Liu frowned and said, "This is not the way a ghost takes revenge on its enemies. What is going on here?" We were wondering when the door was suddenly slammed. Bang, bang, bang. It was as if someone was kicking the door with all his might. We looked at each other, and finally Uncle Liu said, "Don't be afraid, just go open the door." I hurried to open the door, and the moment the door was opened, I saw a burly man standing outside the door. He pushed me hard and asked if my sister was at home. He looked very gangster, with tattoos on his arms, and looked very scary. I asked him who he was, and he said that my sister owed him a large sum of money, but after the repayment period had passed, he couldn't contact anyone, so he came to collect the debt. He showed me a loan agreement, and it was indeed my sister's name on it. I took the agreement and looked at it, and I was stunned. It was written in black and white that my sister borrowed 200,000 yuan, but the guarantor she filled in was me. The most important thing is that the signature was my handwriting, and there was a handprint on it, which looked very familiar. In my mind, I suddenly remembered the last time my sister rented a house and asked me to go over to help sign. This is not usury, it is just stuck in the highest range allowed by law, with an annual interest rate of 24%. But my sister only paid the interest before, and she didn't pay back a penny of the principal. I foolishly said that my sister passed away, and he said that I was the guarantor, and it was natural to repay the debt, and I would pay the money back immediately today. I owed 200,000 yuan inexplicably. My uncle's business was not good and he lost a lot of money. Isn't this pushing us into the fire pit? My uncle was also confused, his face sank, and he asked the big man where my sister spent the money. The big man said impatiently that he was only responsible for lending, and he didn't care where it was spent. My uncle has seen the world after all. He said that he would not pay back a penny of the money, and told the big man to go back to where he came from. The big man was anxious. He said that I was the guarantor. If I didn't pay back the money today, he would kill me. The uncle was not afraid at all. He sneered at the big man. My son is just a college student. He has no money anyway. Why don't you try to kill him? If you kill him, you won't have a penny. You will have to go to jail and even pay for his life, the big man said angrily. Since my son has no money, let the father pay it back. The uncle sneered again. Legally, the money owed by children does not need to be repaid by parents. Don't even think about taking a penny today. At most, you will be charged with 2 murders. Don't scare me. The uncle's expression was particularly ferocious when he spoke. It was as if he had no hope after losing his daughter, and no one wanted to provoke him. The big man was a little panicked for a while, but the uncle went straight to the kitchen and came out with a kitchen knife. The big man took 2 steps back in fear, but the uncle rushed forward, put the kitchen knife on his neck, and roared, "You are setting up a trap for my daughter. She has no job, no income, no employer, and the interest rate is still within the legal limit. How can a loan company be willing to lend 200,000 yuan to such a person? Fuck your mother, dare you say you don't know where she spent the money? You are setting up a trap for my daughter. Did you force my daughter to death?" The big man was so scared that his face turned pale, and he quickly asked the uncle not to get excited, but the uncle couldn't calm down at all. I saw that the skin on the big man's neck was cut by the uncle, and blood flowed down the kitchen knife. The big man finally admitted that my sister was taken to borrow money by her boyfriend at the beginning, and they just looked at the connections to lend money and took the 100,000 yuan principal as a kickback. In the final analysis, it was a trap. Uncle Liu was shocked and said quickly, "I know. Actually, you are not your sister's enemy. She didn't die because of you. Today's night of resurrection, she went to someone else." I asked in astonishment who it was. He said, "Who else could it be? It was most likely her boyfriend." Uncle gnashed his teeth and asked me if I knew where her boyfriend lived. I quickly said I knew because they lived together before and I signed the contract in that rental house. Uncle immediately drove us to the rental house. As a result, as soon as we went upstairs, before we even reached the door, we heard screams coming from the house. My sister's boyfriend ran out of the house. His legs were covered in blood. He was in so much pain that he couldn't walk and crawled on the ground. He was only wearing a pair of shorts and screamed in fear, "It's haunted! It's haunted!" Uncle Liu immediately went over to help him up and asked sternly, "Is it the female ghost in the red dress? Is it your girlfriend?" The man was stunned, and then nodded repeatedly, "It's haunted." My girlfriend suddenly came back, holding me cold and weightless, and she wanted to stab me with a knife. Now she suddenly disappeared. Uncle Liu was very serious. He stated that the man said, "We are here for the ghost girl. What grudge do you have against her? Don't lie to me. If you lie, I may not be able to save your life." The man was scared and said, "I had a big fight with her. Who knew she would come back like this? Why did you fight?" Emotional problems. As soon as the man finished speaking, the uncle yelled angrily, "Bullshit. Did you let her borrow money?" The man was stunned. The uncle rushed up again and punched him in the face. He yelled, "Don't lie. Do you still want to live? I told you not to lie." The man was terrified and finally told everything. It turned out that he had more than one girlfriend. He had always disguised himself as a rich man to hook up with all kinds of girls, and then asked his girlfriends for money under the pretext that the company was having financial difficulties. But he played a trick. He did not ask for money in the name of borrowing, but in the name of investment. He said that the company needed to invest in a project, but was currently short of money, and would give the girlfriends a big share of the money when it made money. At first, those girls seemed to believe it, and would invest a small amount of money, but he would really give more money out for dividends. The girls tasted the small profits and immediately became interested. He first whetted the girls' appetites, and then found an opportunity to say that there was a bigger project. This time, those girlfriends were fooled. Even if they sold everything they had, they would invest more money, but in the end the man refused to give money on the grounds that the investment failed. The money he took was an investment, not a loan. The girls had no way to deal with him. My sister is one of them. This man has been cheating her for money and sex, but he can't trick her into bed. She always said that she was already very rebellious in my father's eyes, and she couldn't let him down anymore. My sister is a person who lacks love. She deeply believes that sooner or later she can become this man's wife. Later, The man used the same trick on her again, and found that my sister was extremely lacking in love, so she agreed without hesitation. Although my sister cares about my uncle, she doesn't care about me at all. She directly tricked me to be a guarantor. After getting the money, the man started to use cold violence and break up, and then declared the investment a failure. The terrible thing is that my sister borrowed more than 200,000. She also owed many loans from other places, all of which were coaxed and deceived by this man to borrow, totaling as much as 550,000. This 550,000 is the burden that crushed my sister. At this moment, my heart became particularly uncomfortable. She lost her boyfriend and owed a huge debt. When she returned home, she knew that her uncle's business was in trouble and he was in debt. Thinking of what she had done, she was filled with grief and anger. Finally, she chose suicide. Uncle's eyes were red with hatred, and Uncle Liu quickly stopped him. "Don't be impulsive. We should leave. He is your daughter's enemy. It is irrational for evil spirits to kill people, and we will be affected if we stay here." I was also afraid that something might happen to my uncle, so Uncle Liu and I pulled him back to the corridor. No matter how the man begged us to go back, we ignored him. Uncle Liu murmured, "I have finally figured it out. Your sister really didn't want you to die. You are not her enemy. She died because of that man," I said. "Why did my sister hurt me?" Uncle Liu said. "Do you remember where she stabbed me?" I recalled the position of the pillow, which was in the middle and lower part. Suddenly, I felt a chill in my crotch. Could it be, she wanted to castrate you? You have been favored all these years. She thought her father favored boys over girls. She was still brooding about this matter after her death, especially because you slept with her before she died. Uncle Liu smiled bitterly. She also wanted you to live to take care of her father in his old age, but she really wanted to castrate you. I just felt my crotch getting colder and colder. It turns out that my sister wanted me to stop being a man. Uncle couldn't help crying. Uncle Liu sighed and said, "I don't understand. She is your biological daughter. Why do you love this boy more?" Uncle cried so hard that he couldn't speak. He could only repeat that he had harmed his daughter. At this moment, a man's scream suddenly came from the corridor. I looked out and saw that my sister had appeared. She stabbed the man's neck with a sharp knife in her hand. Blood gushed out, the man lost the strength to resist, and my sister slowly leaned down. I suddenly remembered what Liubo said. The evil ghost killed a person and drank blood. Although it has achieved these two conditions, it will never be reincarnated. My sister has killed the man now. If she drinks blood again, she will never be reincarnated. What a big blow it will be for my uncle. I rushed directly to my sister regardless of everything. My sister was stunned when she saw me suddenly appear. And I hugged the man's neck, wrapped the wound on his neck tightly with my arm, and blocked the wound on his leg with my leg, pressing on his blood. My sister suddenly bit down and bit my arm hard. "It hurts." I trembled with pain, but I didn't dare to let go at all. Can't let her drink this man's blood. She will never be reborn. Make sure to make it through the midnight hour. My sister bit me hard a few more times. It hurt like hell, but she refused to let go. She got a little impatient, picked up the knife, and looked at my pants. She seemed to want to castrate me again. "No." Suddenly, the uncle came out. With tears in his eyes, he said to my sister, "Why are you so stupid? You are my daughter. Of course I love you the most. There is one thing I have never told you. Why am I so good to other people's children?" My sister and I looked at the uncle. He sat on the ground helplessly, crying. That year we had a drink and dinner. His parents were very drunk. I drove them home. His father told me that I was drunk too. I must find a designated driver. But I was too young. I was sure I could do it. They didn't know anything. They were sleeping in the car. I saw that there was no one at night. I drove the car to 130 miles per hour. I suddenly had a bad premonition in my heart. My uncle collapsed and said, "The car crashed through the guardrail and flew off the cliff. They are gone, but I am still alive. I owe them. I owe them." I delayed for 3 months and asked my friends to help take care of him. Only after he recovered in the hospital did I dare to come and take him to our home. I have wanted to tell you all these years, but how should I tell you? Your father drove drunk and killed his best comrade and his wife. I can't open my mouth. 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 A strong sense of sadness filled my emotions. My parents turned out to die like this. This child is miserable. I killed his parents, and you have been bullying him. I just want to make up for him. I am afraid every time I go to bed these years. I feel guilty when I think of my comrade's face. You think your father doesn't love you, but how can I not love my own child? I have always wanted to atone for my sins, but who knew that I would get you involved? It's all God's retribution for me. I burst into tears. My sister was moved. Her purple face suddenly began to slowly return to normal, and she turned back into the beautiful sister she used to be. She shed tears, but the tears that flowed were blood red. Uncle hit his chest and cried, "It's all my fault. Don't blame your brother. He is the one who has the most miserable life. If it weren't for me, would he have become an orphan? If it weren't for me, would he have been bullied by you since he was a child? I know everything you did to him, but I just can't say it. I don't want you to know that Dad killed his best friend." "Don't say it," Sister suddenly spoke. She turned her head to look at me, and the horrible expression was gone. Instead, she squeezed out a bitter smile at me. He is atonement with you." I heard that Sister was speaking for Uncle. I looked at Uncle, but I couldn't hate him. I was really uncomfortable and painful to learn the truth. But I also remember that he took care of me with great difficulty all these years. My parents passed away, but my uncle has always lived in the deepest pain and self-blame, taking care of me with his youth. He gave me good food, clothes and accommodation, and even when the family was in the most difficult time, he chose to let his own daughter drop out of school to support my studies. My sister loves my father after all. She is afraid that I hate my uncle and no one will take care of her father in the future. I looked at my sister's face. For some reason, the days when I was bullied by her since I was a child came to my mind one by one, turning into countless grievances. Day after day, year after year of bullying. But I didn't say that I was wronged, but bit my lip and whispered, "In fact, I have always wanted to have a better relationship with you, and I have taken away your father's love for many years. I'm sorry." "No need to apologize. I already know that my father loves me. We all have faults, and everyone has deep faults. It is his fault that my father wants to atone for his sins but ignores me. It is also my fault that I borrowed so much money. I am too stupid and foolish to force myself into a dead end." She suddenly leaned over and kissed my forehead. I looked up at her in surprise. She forced out a smile, and the bright red tears turned into transparent tears. "I'm sorry for treating you badly over the years. I never really hated you. I just wanted to take it out on you. I woke up that day and found out it was you. I was angry at you for adding fuel to the fire, but before I died, I figured it out. In fact, you have always been a very good person. I bullied you for so many years, but you still treated me very well." Her body began to gradually become transparent. Uncle cried and rushed over. He stretched out his hand and hugged his daughter in his arms. Sister also hugged him tightly, but not long after, her body turned into starlight and dissipated. Liu Bo stood aside and whispered, "It's not midnight yet," but she rested. Uncle cried and looked at me with guilt. I stretched out my hand and hugged him. He finally burst into tears in my arms, and I couldn't stop crying. At this moment, the man's body also began to gradually become transparent, and even the blood on the ground disappeared. It was as if he had evaporated from the face of the earth, leaving no trace. Uncle Liu told us that this is what happens to people killed by evil spirits. They become scapegoats, repeating the moment of their own death day after day, year after year. For some reason, I suddenly felt a little relieved. That was the retribution he deserved. My uncle and his friends sent me to the hospital to bandage the wounds bitten by my sister. He stayed with me all night. Perhaps he was too busy and too sad these days, so he finally leaned on my shoulder and fell asleep. I endured the pain and stretched out my other hand, gently stroking his hair. He had done something wrong. After all these years of atonement, I forgave him. I looked at my sleeping uncle and murmured, "Sister, you are also a wrong person. I will take good care of him for you." The end.